I appreciate that warm introduction. And I remember a former colleague of mine who, after such a beautiful introduction, said, "It makes me want to weep. There's so much more that could be said." In this case, I think it's more than deserved. I am grateful to be present with you this evening at this annual banquet of the New York Latter-day Saint Professional Association. And I commend this group for your commitment to connecting professionals of strong ethical values, and congratulate you on your efforts to fund college scholarships for youth in need. It is a privilege to be here in the historic Riverside Church in Manhattan. Some of you may not know that many Latter-day Saint homes and church buildings have a connection to the Riverside Church. This church owns and displays two original paintings of Jesus Christ by Heinrich Hoffmann that are frequently used in our publications and that hang in the homes, many of our homes and buildings. I want to acknowledge the many interfaith, government, and community leaders that are here as our guests this evening. Please know that we're very grateful for your friendship and honored by your presence. I'm pleased to participate in honoring New York Attorney General Eric Schneiderman. We appreciate the effort that he's had and made to develop relationships with our church leaders. He's commented somewhat about that this evening. He's graciously hosted local leaders of the church, our church, at Shabbat service. He's attended a sacrament meeting, was kind enough to allow us to host him last year on a tour of the newly completed Philadelphia temple, as he mentioned. Our local leaders also speak very highly of those who work with him in his office. We recognize his willingness to be a strong voice in defense of religious freedom here in New York and abroad. Many of you have seen that article that he referenced denouncing discrimination against Latter-day Saints, published in the Huffington Post a year ago. He's spoken to us this evening about the Religious Rights Unit, an initiative in his office that was formed as part of ongoing efforts to prevent religious discrimination, especially in the workplace. Attorney General Schneiderman's commitment to protecting the religious rights of all people sets an example of positive leadership that we hope all elected officials will follow. My brethren in the Quorum of the 12 and I are speaking much about religious freedom these days. Elders Dallin H. Oaks and Jeffrey R. Holland, Quentin L. Cook, Ronald A. Rasband, Dale G. Renlund, and I have all given published addresses to a wide variety of audiences on this topic in recent years. Most of us more than once. At your banquet here last year, Elder Jeffrey R. Holland eloquently explained that religion has been, quote, "the preeminent influence for good in the world, the heart of our culture." 3 years ago at this event, the late Elder L. Tom Perry, Elder Perry's son Lee, is with us tonight in his role as Dean of the Marriott School of Business at BYU. Elder Perry enthusiastically encouraged you to partner with those of other faiths to preserve religious freedom. And tonight, following up on that, I'd like to discuss some practical things that you can do to help foster a culture that values religious freedom. I say foster a culture that values religious freedom because it is not just laws that sustain freedom of religion or speech or assembly or any of the other essential liberties that we sometimes take for granted. If the time comes in any society that the predominant culture does not sufficiently value these freedoms, then laws, even constitutions, will not be sufficient to sustain and preserve them. We're all aware of nations where freedom of the press and freedom of religion are specifically enshrined in the supreme law of the land, but in fact, those freedoms are non-existent. And we recall a time in Mormon history in the 1800s when the constitutional guarantee of religious freedom in the United States did not protect our early forebears. Without an appreciation in the culture for the value and contributions of religion, the free exercise of religion is in jeopardy. Some of you may be questioning why my brother and I would choose to repeatedly speak about this topic at a gathering of Latter-day Saint business professionals. Let me suggest 3 reasons. First, I'm told that true New Yorkers believe that New York City is the center of everything. I see that there's at least a kernel of truth in that. It is recognized as a worldwide center of banking, finance, mass media, advertising, publishing, fashion, the arts. The cultural, economic, and political influence that this region wields over the rest of the world is significant. As business, religious, and community leaders in this thriving metropolis, you play a role in shaping that influence. Second, we're concerned that religious freedom is in fact under fire in real ways. As I noted in an address last year, although religious freedom lies at the core of what America is, what it stands for, critics now openly ask whether religion belongs in American public life at all. Some say that faithful Americans have no business speaking of their beliefs when addressing issues of public concern, even when those issues unmistakably involve moral judgments. Others condemn churches and religious organizations for expressing moral and religious perspectives on matters of public policy, especially if those perspectives conflict with secular viewpoints. Some even claim, with no sense of history, that religious people and institutions violate the constitutional separation of church and state if they bring their beliefs into the public square. A few scholars have gone so far as to argue that religion does not deserve to be tolerated, much less receive special protection. Recently, it's become popular to argue that freedom of religion is really only right to worship, rather than the right to freely exercise your faith in daily life, as if religion should be kept in a closet or some other private place. These trends should be concerning to all, and religious leaders alone cannot reverse them. The help of everyone is needed, even New York business people. And third, relatedly, the lack of business and professional support for religious freedom is a concern. This manifests itself in overt discrimination against employees seeking to exercise religious rights, discrimination that Attorney General Schneiderman is working so hard to eliminate. It's also seen in the corporate endorsement through advertising and other ways of media messaging that negatively portrays people of faith and the exercise of conscience. So what can you do to help preserve this most important freedom? Time, of course, won't permit an in-depth discussion, but let me briefly suggest 3 ways. 1, begin by educating yourself. Study the issues. Learn for yourself what religious freedom means, why it matters, and how it is being threatened. Our church has developed a website, religiousfreedom.lds.org. That's a good place to start. Then, speak up. Look for appropriate ways to help your children, neighbors, friends, co-workers understand the importance of allowing free exercise of faith and conscience. Help those you associate with in the workplace understand that a growing body of research demonstrates that protecting religious freedom is good for business. For example, as I noted during an address in India in August, a recent study reached the remarkable conclusion that the presence of religious freedom in a country is one of only three factors significantly associated with global economic growth. One of only three factors that universally impact economic growth. Religion delivers such beneficial results because religious freedom generates peace and stability. Where society is stable, there are opportunities to invest and conduct predictable business operations. 10 out of 12 of the World Economic Forum's pillars of national competitiveness were stronger in countries with low government restrictions on religious freedom. Another study estimates that religion contributes $1.2 trillion to the economy each year. Recognize and share the contributions that believing individuals and religious institutions make in your communities. As people appreciate the meaningful good that stems from the exercise of religion and religious beliefs, they'll better understand why the right to exercise such beliefs should be protected. For example, Catholic Charities of the Archdiocese of New York, with whom our local members are pleased to partner, contributed over $790 million in services and helped over 400,000 people between 2014 and 2015. I'm pleased that the LDS Church has a wonderful partnership with the NYC Service Division of the New York City Mayor's Office, whereby our local missionaries have assisted the city in various ways, including responding to 311 calls for snow removal. Could I call that number and get help? I need it. As you speak out, refrain from casting your views on religious freedom as a matter of party politics. Support for the right of free exercise of religion must transcend political skirmishes of the moment. Many good men and women of all political persuasions now work together to bolster this right. It belongs to all Americans. All should work for its preservation. None should be made to feel that political affiliation is an impediment to doing so. And remember, when advocating for the freedom to act upon your religious beliefs, you must also protect the rights of others to do the same. As Attorney General Schneiderman has eloquently stated, quote, "Prejudice against all religions is pernicious, and those who would be defenders of religious liberty must apply one standard to all faiths," unquote. This is true, even when it means that we must protect others' beliefs and practices that we may not like. As you discuss these issues, you may meet with some who believe that it's impossible to balance the right to religious freedom with non-discrimination laws designed to protect our LGBTQ brothers and sisters. We do not subscribe to that idea. Rather, in the pluralistic society in which we live, we believe that a fairness for all approach that strives to balance reasonable safeguards for LGBTQ people with protecting key religious rights is the best way to overcome the divisions and cultural divide in our nation. Where there are conflicts between the right to religious freedom and non-discrimination ideals, both sides should seek a balance, not a total victory. It need not be a zero-sum matter if core rights on all sides are respected. And remember, not everything is core. Finally, religionists should not seek a veto over all non-discrimination laws that offend their religion, and the proponents of non-discrimination should not seek a veto over all assertions of religious freedom. Join with others in the community. President Thomas S. Monson stated, "We have the responsibility to be active in the communities where we live, all Latter-day Saints, and to work cooperatively with other churches and organizations. I think it's important that we eliminate the weakness of one standing alone and substitute for it the strength of people working together. He continued, the time for an insular focus on just our own families and congregations is gone. We have to get involved in the community organizations around us, end quote. My brethren and I are appreciative of the fruitful partnerships and deep friendships that we've developed with fellow faith leaders and others while working together on important issues like religious freedom. I'm grateful that two of these very dear friends have been with us this evening, former New York Attorney General Robert Abrams and Rabbi Joseph Potasnik. We hope that all our local Latter-day Saint leaders, indeed all of our members, are enjoying similar close relationships with the leaders and congregants of faiths, other faiths in their communities. Attorney General Schneiderman mentioned a bit of New York history with the Dutch trading colony of New Amsterdam and Peter Stuyvesant. Let me mention one specific example of what he was touching on. It was in 1657 that Stuyvesant issued an ordinance prohibiting colonists from abetting or harboring those who practiced the Quaker faith or Quaker religion. In response, the town clerk of Vlissingen, a man named Edward Hart, drafted what he called a remonstrance. It was a petition which was signed by 30 residents on December the 27th, 1657. The signers of that document were ordinary citizens. The petition was short, just 642 words. In it, the signers wrote that, quote, the law of love, peace, and liberty extends to Jews, Turks, and Egyptians, and expressed their desire not to offend their fellow man in whatsoever form, name, or title he appears in, whether Presbyterian, Independent, Baptist, or Quaker. Rather, they stated that they, quote, shall be glad to see anything of God in any of them, desiring to do unto all men as we desire all men should do unto us. They then concluded, if any of these said persons come in love unto us, we cannot in conscience lay violent hands upon them, but give them free egress and regress into our town and houses, as God shall persuade our consciences. For we are bound by the law of God and man to do good unto all men and evil to no man. What was once the colony of New Amsterdam, as you know, is, of course, New York City. The town of Vlissingen now bears the name Flushing. The short petition of Peter Hart, or to Stuyvesant by Hart and the citizens of Vlissingen, is now known as the Flushing Remonstrance. Although many have never heard of it, historians and commentators have recognized that the Flushing Remonstrance was perhaps the first document arguing for religious tolerance in the New World, one of the foundational documents of American liberty, and an ancestor of the First Amendment to the Bill of Rights. One historian has gone so far as to call the date of its signing, 360 years ago on December 27th, the day religious freedom was born on this continent. Many of you may consider yourselves to be nothing more than ordinary citizens, striving day to day to provide for your families, serve your communities, fulfill your duty to God. You may wonder whether you can really have an impact on the way religious freedom is viewed by the decision makers and influencers in this critical part of the world. If so, I remind you of the words of my file leader, President Russell M. Nelson, that God uses the unlikely to accomplish the impossible. Like Esther of old, who God put in a position to save the Jews in Persia, you may very well have been placed in your circles of influence for such a time as this. If you're willing to educate yourself, speak up, and join with others, you can make a difference. You can help bring about a rebirth, a fresh appreciation and respect for religious freedom for all in the hearts and minds of your fellow citizens in this most influential part of the world. Again, I express my congratulations to Attorney General Schneiderman and my thanks to all of you. Good night.